Hello, welcome back to Madrona's Pulse Teachings. I am Iris and we are talking about the astrology of the week ahead. I hope that you are doing well. I am still in Toronto, but the next time I see you, I will be back in Nova Scotia, which I dearly miss. It felt like too soon to be taken out of my nest, but I had to come here for a few things. But I'm going back this week, and this week we have particular energy this week, okay? So we come into this week, so we are talking about, I'm getting right into it. We're talking about the 14th through the 20th, okay? So we start this week off with Saturn having just gone retrograde, okay? Saturn goes retrograde on the 13th. On the 14th, we are still very much adjusting to this new change in the energy. And as we are just coming out of that initial kind of intense date, couple of days after period of adjustment to Saturn retrograde, Mercury goes retrograde. And then after Mercury goes retrograde, we have Mars conjunct the South Node. So this is all very particular energy this week that really we potentially need to step back a little bit. We need to step back and just feel what we're feeling. Definitely not react, especially with Mercury stationing retrograde in Leo. Things could be heightened a bit. And also with Mars coming to conjunct the South Node, that is a draining, that is a cleanse. So given that retrogrades are when we can actually feel a little bit more tired, especially with Saturn in Aries, because that is literally a very big shift for the body. And then building to that Mars conjunction of the South Node, we do want to back off a little bit. We want to just kind of show up when we need to show up and also allow ourselves time to really feel what is happening in the moment. Okay, so let's go through this a little bit with a little bit more detail. So as we come into the week, we've just had Saturn stationing retrograde. Now I have a whole video on Saturn stationing retrograde and themes of that, so I'm not going to go into the kind of long-term trajectory of what this means. But in the moment, in this week, what this means is that we might be feeling some sudden mood shifts. We might be feeling exhausted. We might be feeling a sudden drive in our sense of self that we didn't feel. It depends upon your chart, but just knowing that there's a rhythm shifting, there's a gears grinding. And this is not just Saturn stationing retrograde. This is Saturn stationing retrograde in conjunction with Neptune, okay? So that means that there's even more potential to really feel like something is shifting, but to really not understand it. And I feel like I'm saying this quite regularly in my written posts and in my videos. If you're new to my channel, I do daily written posts. They're in the community tab on YouTube, or you can follow me on Instagram and they're there. But what we might need is, to just accept that we don't need to understand it. Because what is going on with Neptune and Saturn is far beyond the mind's understanding. And so we're starting this week out in a heightened moment of this huge transitional process of Saturn and Neptune. So just knowing there also could absolutely be things could be coming up. Part of that Saturn is that it does want us to recommit. It wants us to recommit in a new way. And we're going on a journey to kind of find out about what that recommitting looks like. But if there's things coming up for you, as I'm even saying recommitting, and you kind of know there's something, a goal or something that you really want to be aligned to, that you want to recommit to, that might be something that starts coming up now, but you have got months to work with Saturn retrograde. Okay, but it's part of this week. And that leads us into Mercury stationing retrograde. So Mercury stations retrograde at 15 degrees of Leo on the 17th. And this is happening in Leo. It is a very poignant Mercury retrograde because next week we also have a new moon in Leo that is quite something. And it's a new moon that's opposite Pluto, that's talking to all the outer planets. I will talk about that more later. But this is significant because these Leo themes over the next few weeks are heightened and important. And Mercury will be retrograde. It will go back to 4 degrees of Leo and it will station direct on August 10th. Okay, so we're moving through the rest of July, a little over the first week of August with Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde is always an opportunity for new directions, new understandings to emerge. That requires being redirected, okay, usually. Or just, and that redirection, sometimes it's literally, I thought I was going this way with my plan and now we're going this way. But sometimes it's just an inner gaze with Mercury, because Mercury plays into our inner gaze that suddenly is usually forced to redirect the gaze. But in that redirection, our consciousness opens, right? And if we had just been going straight ahead, we wouldn't have gotten that openness of consciousness in order to realize there's a better route for this moment. And this is happening in Leo. So especially as we approach the 17th, so pretty much all week, because it's right in the middle of our week, we definitely want to be mindful of not reacting. With Mercury retrograde in Leo, passions can be heightened. A little bit of righteousness can be heightened. A little bit of out of place righteousness can be heightened. Remembering that this is happening for everyone. And so if, you're finding yourself pulled into an argument or wires are crossing, whether that's with a friend or a partner or a colleague, we really just want to back off. We really want to have that little mindfulness flag go up and say, this is probably a dead end, because there's not necessarily a right outcome for this situation. And we just want to back off, take some space, let the fires simmer down a little bit, because this Mercury could be a little bit confused about what it wants. It could be a little bit confused about what it even wants to say. And that is happening so that this Mercury can get very clear about what it wants to say. So Mercury and Leo themes, that Mercury wants to express from the heart. It wants to express joyfulness that helps. Sorry, it's really hot in here. I feel like I'm just sweating in the Leo fires. It wants to express from the heart that brings joy to others. And yet that joy wants to come just from this beautiful exchange of creative heart fire. However, Leo can get in a bit of a vicious loop of seeking validation, of liking the validation or normalizing the validation of a performative voice, a performative self. And that is when Leo starts performing for the sake of validation, for the sake of being centered, rather than from just the pure spark of that creative energy. And so Mercury retrograde in Leo is helping us to realign with our heart fire. Okay, and that's what the rest of July into August are going to be about. And then that can come through into our projects, into the things that we're working on. We could get new insights into the directions we need to take our projects. And those new insights most likely want to be aligned to this heart space that wasn't quite open. And the redirection from Mercury retrograde helps us with that. And in the period around the retrograde station, which is this week, that's when things can be heightened in terms of confusion or direction or what I really want. And so that's why we don't want to just, it's not a week to throw down. We want to just take ourselves out of the equation maybe. And because that leads us also into Mars conjunct the South Node, there's just one other thing I want to say about that Mercury. As Mercury is making its station retrograde, it is in a fire trine with Ceres and Aries. This was going on last week. It pulls us into this week. And so Ceres and Aries is the Earth Mother who is quite driven to go after what she loves, to go after what will nurture herself. She is quite driven to protect what she loves. And in Aries, especially with Ceres, because Ceres is a big part of our reparenting journey. Ceres and also Saturn, who is retrograde this week, they are places in the chart that are essential when we are on journeys of kind of reclaiming that usually involves reparenting and giving ourselves things that we just couldn't get in childhood. And it's really not about the blame of the reasons why we didn't get that. It's about knowing where we are now and giving it to ourselves. And so Ceres in Aries wants to be kind of pouring self-love into our desires by creating the energy to protect what we need to protect so that we can go after what we love. And she is pouring that love and that protective spirit into a Mercury in Leo stationing retrograde. So yes, it's a trine, but in that kind of day before and day after and day of, again, that confusion could be high. So if we're feeling drawn in, we want to just kind of step out. And we want to acknowledge that Ceres is here pouring that into our heart space, wanting us to communicate from a place of creative joy, bringing that into however we're showing up, especially into our words and especially into our projects, what we're working on right now, whatever that means to you. So just knowing that the Earth Mother is there. And this then brings us to the last piece of this week's kind of narrative, which is that Mars is conjuncting the South Node. This is happening at 19 degrees of Virgo. It's on the 19th or 20th. Those 2 days, it's exact. Depends where we are, when it's exact. But the energy is building all week. And then as we come into the end of this week, it's becoming exact. This can be a drain, okay? Now, if you're feeling that kind of drain of energy, it is because there is stuff going on in psyche and it is wanting to help bring the Mars into Virgo that wants to be quite driven in how it wants to place its energy and where it wants to put its energy and how it wants to direct the path that you're walking on from your daily kind of care. Virgo is the mind-body connection, and Mars in Virgo can be very skilled at supporting the mind-body connection. It can also be way overdriven. It can also work from a place of fear and be obsessive. It can get caught into cycles of trying to perfect, say, the body based on what a heteronormative media blah, blah, blah has taught us the body is supposed to be versus what your particular mind-body connection actually needs, which a lot of times doesn't look like what we're taught, especially in wellness industries. And so this Mars is coming into that conjunction with the South Node to help it release any of that perfectionism, any of that driven from fear, thinking that the Mars energy has to show up a specific way, has to perform perfectionism, is too hard on the body, is too hard on the mind. Mars in Virgo can be very hard on the mind, and it can also create a lot of anxiety. So if you're feeling any kind of call to yin moments as we approach this, you want to honor them, because in those yin moments, in those kind of relaxing states that actually hold us so that we can release. And there is a big release going on with this Mars conjuncting the South Node as we close out this week, so that we can have our drive, this is transiting Mars, of course, so that we can access this archetypal drive in this moment that wants to help us on a path that is really connecting us to what our mind body needs, to what it means to be of service in a way that is of service to ourselves and to that which we are called. Part of the South Node cleanse in Virgo is also martyring. It is the romanticization of martyring. It is justification of martyring for the sake of family, for the sake of cause. Those are Virgo habits that are driven from fear or blind spots and are sacrificing the self for the sake of an idea of martyring the self, which actually prevents the self from showing up and doing the best that it can in a situation. Because if we're not of service to the self, which is fully taking care of the self and its needs, then we cannot show up and fully be of care to a situation. And so if martyring is something, if you have a lot of Virgo in your chart, if that's how it shows up, that can also be something that comes up, and it's what wants to be cleared from that drive, because Mars in Virgo doesn't want to be a martyr. It wants to actually be really sure of its steps, and it wants to know what it's doing, and it wants to sanctify its own life and its own experience and how it literally puts its energy into the world. And so if there's anything that's getting in the way of that, and if it's coming from too much focus, too much attention, too much glorification of the word service. There can be a lot of romanticizing of the word service for strong Virgo, and that can also come from a place of fear and ego, which the South Node wants to be cleared up, okay? Virgo wants us to also be really honest with ourselves. All the earth signs kind of want us to be honest with ourselves, so that we can be in the best relationship we can be with, in Virgo's case, our mind-body connection. But it's a lot of energy, that conjunction, and you could feel it, especially if you have placements around 19 degrees of Virgo or Pisces, or in the squares to Gemini and Sag. Okay, with that, I am going to leave you with this astro forecast. I am sending out lots of love. As always, next time I see you, I hope I'm oceanside, though sometimes I know folks really like when I'm talking about, if you're new to my channel, I'm usually not with like a lavender wall behind me anymore. Like when there's the ocean or the greenery behind me and people ask for that. It depends on the time of day I'm recording, because sometimes it's like a huge white blob and it's really not something that's gonna relax you. So that's why sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Okay, lots of love. Bye-bye.